Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Caccera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Caccera.
Welcome in, Joe Caccera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you for those that are watching us on the live feed of Facebook. We appreciate that very much. We want to continue to grow the audience, grow the show. How do we do that? We want to get this information to as many people as we can, as possible. This is a podcast, of course, but we appreciate those that are listening to the show, watching the show now live on Facebook. However, be sure to download the podcast. That way you can listen to the show, follow the show at your convenience. You could do that by going to iTunes and just typing in Real Estate Radio Live. You can go to Google+, Stitcher. You can even go to our website. Anywhere virtually you go online and enter in the words Real Estate Radio Live, it should give you access to the podcast. Download it if you would. Share it with your friends, family, and coworkers. We want to continue to grow the awareness. For those that may have not been following the show, this is focused on education information. When I started it almost 8 years ago, that is what we do. So we try to have great guests like today. I'll introduce in just a second. Good content information for the prime purpose to educate the consumers. Well, we're excited to do a special show. Jack Russo's along with us today again. Most of you know him by now. You're part of the show now. You're a main fixture.
I appreciate that, Joe. And I got here early because I have a guest you welcomed in who's a lawyer from Paris, France.
I love it.
Who's been with the firm or associated with the firm for nearly 5 years. And I said, Clotilde, and I did it, of course, on the fly. She said, no, I'm not prepared. And she said, no, okay. I dragged her. I said, we'll get there. She said, well, we have to get there on time. And I said, I'll bring a little French water for Joe. And I bring you, because we're doing a deal. And you see, this is a perfect topic to sum up what we've covered so far in the 18 different topics or so.
Yeah.
Which is, when you get a deal, you get a bunch of paperwork. It looks like this. It's a big stack of paper. This is actually a small stack, but it's the beginning of a major M&A transaction. And the question that comes up is, when in that transaction is a due diligence provision that says you've complied with all European Union law. Well, I'm not a lawyer in the European Union, so I've got to pull in Clotilde Biron.
Okay.
We'll introduce her. She's a specialist. Say hello, Clotilde.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Welcome in. It's a pleasure to have you. When Jack sent me an email and said he's got a special guest, I thought, this is great. I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity, again, because, I know Jack feels the same way. We're passionate about education and information. In this case, a lot of people are trying to have a better understanding. We started this series, again, I think that's 20 plus now, on starting something new in Silicon Valley and then just navigating through this process. And now to get where we are now in this topic today, and maybe you could give us a highlight of that, Jack, and then do a formal introduction. Maybe give us a reminder, or the listening audience, about your firm, and then maybe we could have your guest do the same.
Sure. So my name is Jack Russo. I'm the managing partner at ComputerLaw Group in Palo Alto, downtown Palo Alto. We also have an office in San Francisco, but our focus is typically Silicon Valley startups, although we help growing companies, even public companies. And what happens that brings this topic to fore and allows me to introduce Miss Biron, Clotilde is how I know her by her first name, as an expert in European Union law that's relevant to intellectual property, IT, information technology, and now the GDPR, which is this privacy legislation we've talked about, which we have a version of that's coming to California specifically as the California Privacy Act, which may be even stronger than the GDPR. So when you get to the point of growing a business, let's say you've grown it to $100 million of revenue. That's a great business. You might get a big multiple, sometimes 10x.
Yep.
You're growing a business right now. I'm sure you're thinking along these designs. And then someone makes an offer. And then you, the lawyer, get the call saying, hey, I got an offer from a public company. Sometimes it's Google, sometimes it's Apple, sometimes it's Facebook, sometimes it's Microsoft, sometimes it's a host of others. They're offering me $1 billion for my data-driven business. Can you help me with the closing? Well, okay, are we in compliance with all of these things that come up in all of these areas?
Yeah.
And you have to pull together a virtual team of lawyers. So I start making calls to people like Clotilde saying, hey, we need some European Union talent on the team.
Okay.
And, of course, big lawyers will tell you they can do this in their own firm. I'm here to tell you that's not necessarily the case, but they're definitely stretching the globe.
Okay.
But there's also groups of smaller lawyers that affiliate together. And Clotilde is a good example because she gets the call. She's willing to jump on a plane and fly over and make things happen quickly. So she's a good example of a young professional in Paris growing their own practice, who's an expert in areas, and I thought we would pick her brain for a few minutes about what's happening with the GDPR, because everyone expected, well, maybe there'll be a lot of litigation, maybe there'll be a lot of enforcement. Right now, it sounds like there's a lot of compliance efforts. We were talking on the way driving down. Tell us, Clotilde.
Exactly.
If you could first, Clotilde, if you could please first give the audience a little bit about your background and the legal practice over in France, and then start the topic. It'd be wonderful. Thanks.
Well, my name is Clotilde. I'm an attorney at law in Paris, France. I met you like 5 years ago when I did an internship at your firm, Jack, and it was quite an amazing experience, and so I could develop a network here and experience, of course, and an expertise in intellectual property law, IP law, and data protection. So when I started practicing in Paris in 2014, I focus on these topics.
And what's interesting is the Parisian style and the French style of training lawyers is they have to do an internship.
Oh, is that right?
So
it's
there's
mandatory.
a requirement to get the degree. See, in the U.S., we don't do this as much. It used to be the case there would be a guild system where lawyers in training would read law. It was called reading law with a senior lawyer. You couldn't become a lawyer unless you did that. Still, in Paris and I think in the UK, they have a bit of that tradition. You really have to pick a firm. She did the right thing saying, I want to pick a firm outside of France. I want to extend my wings to see what it's like to practice elsewhere. That's the future lawyer. The future lawyer has a global perspective. So I applaud her for that.
And especially in IP/IT law, because there is no boundaries.
That's right.
Well, the businesses are all becoming very virtual. If you want to expand your business to Florida, you can probably flip a switch. And all of a sudden, you don't need an office. You don't need an office manager. You don't need a payroll in Florida. You can do that from here. And that gets us to the big topic, which is your brand may extend itself will extend itself beyond the United States and into the EU. And that brings into effect all of these questions under this legislation called the GDPR.
Yeah. For those that are listening, what's the GDPR?
The acronym.
For
Clotilde, the General Data Protection Regulation. That sounds so onerous.
There is no a day I don't talk about the GDPR.
Oh, okay.
So GDPR means General Data Protection Regulation that applies since May the 25th of this year.
Got it.
So it's a big change in the data protection legal system in Europe because this regulation applies in the 28 member states of Europe.
27 soon if Brexit is successful.
Yeah, let's see how it goes.
No, but think about that, because it means then the UK will adopt its own version, which the Swiss have adopted. So you'll see some websites say, we attempt to comply, and you're going to see this happen with California, we attempt to comply with the GDPR, Swiss law, UK law, and
so
it probably will say California law next too, because California is like its own republic. I mean, that's the way it's becoming. So a more interesting show, if we ever have Clotilde back in the future, although we can cover it generally, is
you could call in from Paris too. You know,
that's right. You have the ability to call in.
That's right.
Let's do this.
So tell us what's happening over the last 4 or 5 months since May 28th, 2018, because now it's been in effect for going on 4 or 5 months, right?
Yeah, so the GDPR sets forth new obligations for data controllers, but also data processors. So the main change, is before the GDPR applied, we had distinctive legal system. Like, for example, France has its own data protection law for 40 years now.
Different from the UK, different from Brussels,
Exactly.
different from Italy. Okay.
So we had directives, European directives, so the system was quite harmonized. But the GDPR brings a new step in the data protection, because now we have a uniform legal provisions, and of course for what? In order to protect the data subject.
The data subject typically being an individual, but it could be an organization as well,
no,
right?
Actually,
Just individuals?
No, data subjects are
always
individual,
okay.
because data protection means all the data, all the element information that can directly or indirectly identify one individual.
Okay.
So when you look at the clients I talk to, they all get offended. I have to appoint a DPO, a data protection officer, as they look at me with outrage, like, what is this? Some sort of like forced regulation on me? I'm not even in Paris. I'm not even in France. I don't even go there anymore. They say I don't even want to travel. I stay right in my little radio booth. I stay right in my home state. And I said, but your website is going out and reaching customers in the European Union, even if it's a small sliver. And then they have to have a DPO, a data protection officer, right?
This is one of the major change of the GDPR, is its extraterritoriality, because now the data protection provision don't only apply on EU companies processing data in EU, but also any foreign company not established in Europe, who operate data processing that concern European residents.
So Facebook for sure, Google for sure, Facebook for sure,
of course,
Apple for sure, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they have actual offices in France too, but the reality is any business that manages data, of which there are lots of the advanced businesses are just managing data. They don't even necessarily do operations physically. They do everything by data. We have law firms that are becoming virtual who are saying, I don't even want to have an office. I called a lawyer just to put a footnote. And I said, can I meet you? I think I mentioned this. He was like, why? I said, because I want to hire you.
Isn't that funny?
He said, well, usually I just like say hello over the phone, send you my fee agreement, you send me a check.
Oh, my God.
I mean, I laughed. And he said, well, you know, we don't have a virtual office. We usually meet in a coffee shop. I just about said, wow, you guys are pretty advanced. He said, well, we're trying to cut the cost. And the office environment, the infrastructure of an office adds about 20% to a bill. That was his argument.
I understand.
And he said, we have the best rates. That's probably how you heard of us. And I said, well, I'm trying to hire you for a situation that we have. And he said, well, I'm happy to meet you, but it's not going to be in an office. We'll meet in a restaurant. I'll buy you lunch. And I said, well, how do you do your work? He says, I've got a home office. And that's becoming a new play.
Well, the other one is the one that's growing like wildfire, speaking of that, is WeWork.
Sure.
So these huge organizations, people come all together and work from different businesses, different cultures in these big warehouses, but they're really up-to-date, modern. You know, it's almost like this big networking community.
But he's got clients, just to use that example, he, who's located in Dallas, Texas, has clients in Paris, all over the world, all over the EU. He's a very bright guy. And I said, are you, come on, he said, it's a joke. I said to him at one point, when I finally met him, are you complying with the GDPR? He said, with a Texas drawl, GDPR, what? You know, like, and I said, well, you have clients, I know, in Paris and elsewhere. And he was like, so what? I said, so you're collecting data about them, right? And he said, yeah. I said, well, do you cover that in your representation agreement? He said, no. And then I thought of Clotilde. That's just a small example. Obviously, it's not like the big selling your company example.
So is there some type of grace period, first of all, you guys, number one, and number two, how serious do you think most companies, firms are taking this? And is it going to take some time? Give us an idea of that. Are they taking it very serious? Bigger companies?
I'll say in the U.S., people want to ignore it and then sort of wonder, well, don't we have to deal with it anyway for the California legislation? But you tell us what you think.
They could no longer ignore it because that may directly impact their business activity. And just waiting for get compliant is not the best solution. So as soon as possible, get compliant to the GDPR. But these steps to get compliance are very easy. The first one is just to to think about it and just to look at the situation and see if your business is actually impacted by the GDPR provision, because it may not actually.
Oh, I see.
So you just need to think with all the people working for you and with your attorney and see if the provision really apply. So this is what I do right now.
So if a company, it's a good question. So if someone's out there listening to this and they're a company, whether it be small or large, and they're wondering, well, who do I first contact to find out, number one, if it applies to me, number two, if it does, how do I get the help to set this up? Jack, do they contact you, her?
Typically people don't want to dial a number in Paris because they think it's going to cost them a long-distance call. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
If they have an initial question, I can certainly answer. But the deeper questions, like, do we need a DPO on the soil in Paris? Depending on what the interpretation is of where the data is and all that jazz, I would turn to Clotilde and say, are you willing to be the DPO for this company? And interestingly, she provides that service.
Really?
So that's an interesting aspect, to actually have an on-the-ground expert who's going to help you in the EU and give you the ability to say, we're compliant with an outside expert who has agreed to take responsibility as the data protection officer.
This is a service that I developed it after looking at my practice and realized that some of my clients really need a DPO, an external DPO, but maybe don't want to hire someone
or they don't want the responsibility. They don't want to be like reading the regulations, right?
That makes sense.
It's just maybe more convenient for them to hire their own attorney.
Yes.
And so I take the service, all the responsibility.
Right.
I
think that's interesting because a lot of lawyers will push back when clients say, would you be my fill in the blank agent, escrow agent?
Right.
A lot of lawyers are like, that's more responsibility. And I see this data protection stuff as leading to more lawyers overseas saying, we can help and you can allow us to be your DPO and we'll handle the objections, the complaints, the audit requests. It becomes like an interesting way to outsource.
Right.
I don't know how expensive it is. You can tell us more about how much do people end up spending for this. But to some degree, it's a way to get compliant, right?
Well, first of all, before becoming their DPO, I prefer to accompany them in their compliance process, so that I have a full overview of the activity and the situation. So regarding the cost, actually this is not that expensive. Usually what I do is an initial assessment of the situation. So it takes as many as a workshop or a discussion as needed in order to better understand the situation and then to better see or define an action plan with different topics, like, for example, reviewing of all your agreements, business or employment, if you have.
Because there may be others that are collecting data for you that you have to control and make sure they comply. That's one of the reasons you look at those agreements. So the interesting part that I thought of is, as she finds issues, she's giving a lot of almost free legal advice to people who start to hand off their privacy issues, because she's going to say, well, you haven't registered a trademark in Europe, so you have exposure, and that leads to the due diligence topic we talked about, which is it all circles back to eventually people want to cash out of their businesses, but if they have defects in the business, the valuation goes down because the buyer says, well, you never complied with the GDPR. You never got your trademarks registered in Europe. You never protected your IP elsewhere. And they start making lists of objections, almost like a punch list on real estate, if you want to use that analogy. And what you thought was a $10 million business, all of a sudden is a $6 million business. Or what you thought was a $1 billion business is now a $400 million business. Still large, but you lost a lot of money.
Big amount.
Right?
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We got a great topic going on today. Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. And the topic today is we're doing some due diligence on GDPR, right? General Data Protection Regulation. We'll be back with it. We're going to take a quick break. For those that are watching us on Facebook, stick with us. It's really quick. We'll be back with you in just a minute. Thanks.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.
How would you like the opportunity to secure a record low interest rate while buying and or selling your home? In addition, how would you like to save 20% or more on your entire real estate transaction? Finally, how would you like to bundle all your real estate services in one location? Well, now you can achieve this with BundleSelect.com. That's right, save on real estate lending and title. With BundleSelect.com, technology and a personal concierge are at your service to save you time and money. BundleSelect's hand-picked team of experts will save you thousands of dollars by bundling real estate lending and title services. BundleSelect.com gives you all the control, including using your own realtor. I'm Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, and I have been on the radio educating consumers for years. I'm here to tell you BundleSelect.com is the best way to save money on real estate. By bundling services, you could save tens of thousands of dollars. Visit BundleSelect.com.
The estimated minimum savings are based on a comparison with the national average. Individual results may vary, and the estimated savings are not guaranteed. Bundle Select Inc. is a licensed real estate broker. California Bureau of Real Estate Broker license number 004666902.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's topic or guests, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Kuchera.
Welcome back in, Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. I hope you were entertained for a minute or so during our break there on Facebook. Today our topic is we're doing some due diligence on GDPR, and that is General Data Protection Regulation. I have experts in studio here. Jack's kind enough to spend some time with us. Just to remind those, we've been doing this series, starting something new in Silicon Valley and I think this is 20 plus 20? Now. Actually, the gal that does the podcast sent me an email. She said it was 20 or 21.
21, okay.
So an ongoing series. What I would suggest is if you're just tuning in now and you're thinking, God, this is interesting, but there is a story to this, and what I mean is we started back, 3 or 4 months ago, right from the beginning, starting a company. How do you name it? How do you protect things? How do you hire people? How do you get partners? How do you invest? How do you raise money? And now we're in the due diligence stage of this, right, the data protection, and just wanted to kind of bring people up to speed. Go back and, if you can, have the time, listen to the podcast. You go to RERadiolive.com, or if you have the podcast, you could do a search. And all the shows are there, all the past shows.
There's a playlist that you could start with the first time we did it, and then we linked each of them. But then at times, I listen to the shows, the various other shows you do, and I see connections. Like when you talk about real estate finance, a second trust deed on a house often becomes the initial capital for a startup. Right. Here in Silicon Valley, there's so much wealth that gets created in real estate. And people starting businesses are not necessarily finding money instantly. They don't want to do that because they want to keep complete control. Right. So they use real estate as their leverage to be able to start the business. Right. And so this stuff all does tie together in many ways. And then when you're at the point of doing due diligence for a transaction, having resources like Clotilde and other international experts, when issues come up that have to be addressed, and the one that's coming up more and more, it's the reason we're hammering on it, is in the M&A negotiation, people are saying, how are you complying with GDPR? How are you complying with the coming California legislation? How are you complying with the rights of individuals? We don't want this business to face the congressional music that Facebook and Twitter this week, yesterday, were facing on Capitol Hill. I mean, the big news was all the stuff dealing with Trump. We won't go down that rabbit hole. But there was other news where essentially Twitter lost 5% of its value because of some poor answers that Jack Dorsey, the CEO, gave on Capitol Hill. Facebook lost 2% of its value because of its COO, Sheryl Sandberg, giving some not well-accepted answers is the way I'll say it. Not bad answers, but, it's just more excuses, and the street, Wall Street, was like, come on, can you guys get this right? So a lot of the planning that you have to do, and you would have thought these folks would have done it 2 years ago is when this legislation first made its way to paper, right?
When the GDPR was adopted.
Yes, it was 2 years. You asked a question about grace period in the last segment. There was a 2-year grace period to get compliant. May of 2016 is when the ink froze on the paper so people could start to read that legislation and say, we'll take the next 2 years. Of course, we're like, yeah, we'll wait to see. Maybe the European Union will blow up in the meantime. There's Brexit. I mean, right? People were thinking that way.
Do you guys think that the Facebooks and the Googles, well, no, maybe not Google so much, but a lot of these high-tech companies, they were the darlings for years. You and I talked about this for Jack. They could do nothing wrong. Everybody's enamored by them. And now it's almost... They had the too big to fail, like the banks did a while back. Like, I don't care what I do, I'm higher than everybody else. No one's going to harm me. I don't know. You think there's a little bit of that?
And Clotilde should weigh in on this, but I think there's a huge cultural difference. When you get to the point of amassing 2.2 billion members,
it's a lot.
You are bringing in 20 to 200 to 2,000 different cultures. Maybe
good point.
Maybe more than that.
Right.
The French have always had a privacy culture, even before the GDPR.
Interesting. Okay.
So talk about that for a minute, because the French really, they're like offended that you're keeping all this data. They're offended that you have so much information on someone. That's been true for a while, right?
Yeah, that's true, and that's one of the reasons why we have the GDPR is... In Europe, some people can see the big five, the GAFAM, Google.
GAFAM, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Apple,
Facebook,
Amazon, Microsoft.
And Microsoft.
GAFAM. It's like a mafia term.
Yeah, sounds like it.
GAFAM, like a big monster who provide amazing services, but who process your data. Maybe it's in our culture to be scared about that, and we want more control of our data.
Yeah.
And the GDPR is one of the reactions
to it. GAFAM, by the way, collectively, the valuation of that, I'll call it an oligopoly. Right. It's not quite that, but that collection of companies, their valuation is more than 50% of the valuation of all the other countries in the world collectively. Think about that.
Hard to put that in perspective.
Those 5 companies have more value than hundreds of other countries collectively.
Wow.
They're producing more wealth. They're producing more transactions. They're producing more data collection. So to not imagine, hey, if we get that big, we're going to get some pushback on privacy, and not start baking in some way for people, like the latest really is, people think there should be a one-button way to opt out. One button, not find this section and go through. One button, right on the front.
And then they try to collect data from you for opting out, right?
Exactly.
Why are you?
Exactly.
Is there something we...
And as I said, people more and more are saying, look, there's too much information.
Right.
There's too much out there. There's too much exposed. And, of course, the more that's exposed, the more that can be hijacked.
Right.
I mean, we came off the freeway to join you today. There's a big sign. It must be a lawyer that has an 800. It doesn't say it's a lawyer. Have you been hacked? Contact us. We can get you a remedy. These are class action lawyers that are looking for clients who are subject to having been hacked, upset about it, and are willing to file lawsuits. So not complying, and the reason this due diligence topic is so big, when you don't pull in a resource like Clotilde and other international help to get compliance to occur, your company is at risk of being in a class action case here in the U.S. And also whatever can happen in Europe, which is not inconsequential, because it can be up to 20 million euro fine, total fine, that can be a challenge?
Yes, the administrative fine can be up to 20 million euros or 4% of the global annual turnover.
Whichever is higher.
The highest number.
The highest number.
The highest amount.
So it could be big. Has that happened yet?
Well, this fine, I'm sure that they have been done for the big 5 companies. Because
the fines have already been levied?
Yeah.
You think they've been levied?
Given this huge amount of fine, I'm sure that it's like a weapon.
It's a weapon of mass destruction.
Against the big 5 companies.
So, Clotilde, if someone listening to the show, themselves, someone else, friends, or someone they know, that potentially might be interested in your services, is there a location where they could reach you? Do you have a website or email, or how would they do that? If someone's listening to this show later and they figure out they may really need to talk to you about potentially using the services, how would they reach you?
I have a website, so it's www.avocat-biron.com.
Okay.
and where you can find all my contact info. Don't hesitate to contact Jack also because
That's a good point.
Yes, we work together.
But avocat is the French term for attorney, and dash your last name, Biron, BIRON.com.
Yes.
So
is that
in
typically
the US,
how the
the U.S. use a different convention. People in the U.S. tend to use like computer, and then they add law. So you could have Biron Law in the future.com. It'd be a little more Americanized.
Maybe the domain name is available.
I know, right? No, but you get into, you help lawyers who come here. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah, right.
In France, I'm sure this is very common. Avocat-Russo.
Exactly.
But in the U.S., we like to have the name of the firm with law. So even my firm, my old firm, Fenwick & West, they debated for a long time, should we be Fenwick Law? They were able to get Fenwick.com, so they went with Fenwick.com. But there are a lot of people that are like, you might be confused with another Fenwick. There's a real estate company called Fenwick. There's a management. Why don't you go with Fenwick Law? Because now there's even computer.law. Where the subdomain is .law. So there are people grabbing all these other domains. Right. But the point is, you can reach people very quickly in this world. It's amazing how we've shrunk things through things like LinkedIn. Right. Didn't you just do something on LinkedIn that you posted, and all of a sudden people started contacting you here in the U.S.?
Yeah, of course.
Tell that story, because it's really related to what's happening here.
I just published a short message with a picture of your office, Jack.
On LinkedIn?
I was yesterday presenting the GDPR compliance process, and it was a seminar. And so I just published it online on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I just realized I had like 800 views already.
Fast.
And so very
that's
quick.
The beauty about that, right? I mean,
and she gets a phone call from someone in Brazil who says, my partner's in Silicon Valley, would you meet him for lunch? It doesn't get better than that. You make things happen, and that's what happens in Silicon Valley. There's a certain production of value creation very, very rapidly.
Yeah. That's the energy
That's true.
Valley.
Right.
And who would have known that you were going to be doing a podcast this afternoon, right?
And she was very spontaneous. This is unscripted. She's very spontaneous. I said, we're going to go down to Joe's. She's like, really? I'm not ready. I said, don't worry.
I'm not ready, but actually the GDPR, I know it by heart.
That's right. That's right.
And anyone that emails Clotilde at avocat-biron.com, she has a great set of 28 slides, 25 to 30 slides, that tells the whole story, which I'm sure you'll give for free. Maybe you've already published there.
Okay.
And that tells the story in a way where when you try to figure out, well, what's the next step, you're way ahead of the game.
Right.
I would send those slides to someone if asked, because it's so well done and it's so right to the point.
Well, we're running out of time. We got a minute or so. So how would you kind of wrap this up and summarize for people that are listening? Next steps, I guess, the thing to do, who to contact if they're concerned.
So I like to say to people, start with the end in mind. When you form a business, well, first of all, you have to realize you're not going to live forever, okay? My mom, who's 88, was like, I don't know, man, I'm still alive. She's like saying, I'm ready. Yeah. I said, Mom, you should live to 100. My next-door neighbor writes the books about living to 100.
Right.
Of course, whether anyone will get there. So sooner or later, the business is going to either be sold or transitioned, or there's going to be a succession plan, maybe your family. Start to imagine what that due diligence will be in that transition.
Got it.
Some transition will happen.
Right.
Hopefully for a lot of money, hopefully for a lot of value, maybe for stock in another company. All of these issues like the IP, the IT, the GDPR, the privacy, the regulations, they have to be baked into the thinking, because you don't want to take the stock hit that Twitter took. Now there's going to be class action cases behind that. The stock hit that Facebook took, they're already subject to class action cases on that. It all diminishes all that created wealth. All that value just disappears. You got to start planning with that in mind, and then you bring in talent. Like Clotilde and people in her firm who help.
And it may seem complicated to deal with all the IP matters, all the GDPR compliance process, but it's for sure not a waste of time.
No, not at all.
So just go to see an attorney, and it's not a waste of energy nor time, and it will pay for sure.
Oh, it's an investment, right?
At the right time.
The return on the investment is worth far more than what you would expect.
Well, plus I would also, and we've talked about this for years, Jack. I mean, when you're starting with the end in mind, as you talked about, an example would be if you have investors coming in and doing due diligence on your company even before an offer's made or something, when they see these things in place, what kind of image is that picture for them?
It's much more careful. This person is careful. I can trust them with my money. They're not reckless. I mean, someone told this joke yesterday. They said, do you think Donald Trump is a successful businessman? And, of course, there were a bunch of people that said, yeah, absolutely, he's got all this real estate. I said, he never really got any outside investors, because if they ever did the due diligence, they would have a really hard time going through all those books and records of all those transactions. They probably would have a really hard time, right, if you think about it.
Oh, I can't even imagine. All right, unfortunately, we're going to run out of time. You guys, thank you. It was a great show.
Thank you, Clotilde, for coming on the spot in a spontaneous way.
Good to have you here.
You're very well done. Thank you, Joe, for having us.
Yes,
thank you very much. It was really well done.
Thanks again for tuning in. For those that are following us on Facebook, remember you could always download the podcast. For more information, you could always go to RERL-1550. Thanks again. Take care. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.